Everybody. Thanks for joining me. My name's Tom and I'm from a group called Stories of the Heart. My partner Scott and I have put this together and we'd like you to join us. I will be joining him in a few minutes and we're going to do another video update for you on what's going on with Stories of the Heart. But right now I'd like to share with you a story that I wrote. We're trying to figure out how to inspire you, and hopefully this will do that. We're looking for stories that are funny and sad, and we're going to give you a few ideas of topics or ideas to inspire you later on. One of those is basically talking about loneliness, and when I thought about that, this story came to mind. I remember in 1970 when The Boys in the Band was released. I was in Richmond, Indiana. I was a student teacher under the odoriferous tutelage of Mrs. Alley, who wore a different dress or outfit every day, at least for the 2 months that I taught her classes. She wore tons of perfume. I think she did so because she literally spent the whole day in the teacher's lounge smoking cigarettes. She never gave me any advice, any encouragement, any friendship, or one iota of positive feedback. I have no idea why she was so hateful. Maybe she was just over dealing with the rookie student teachers. Maybe she was bored to tears with teaching. Maybe she knew I was gay and was pissed off about that. I didn't. I was so confused and lost and crushed by loneliness and her obvious rejection. I was teaching basic speech, creative writing, advanced speech, and a sophomore English class. The only class that I was really prepared to teach was the basic speech class. I muddled through the English class. I was one chapter ahead of the writing class in their textbook, and the advanced speech class was in the process of preparing for a speech tournament. I'd never been to a speech tournament, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Imagine being told that you needed to prepare a bunch of high school seniors for a mock legislative session using Robert's Rules of Order. What the? I learned right along with them, and yet none of us really had a clue what to expect. The kids that were entered in the extemporaneous event and the persuasion event got a bit more help from me because at least I understood what they were being asked to do. They all were so valiant, and they got shortchanged by my lack of knowledge, and I can't remember anything about that day really, except for the royal mistake that I made trying to help one of my students. It caused Mrs. Alley to show her true feelings for me and solidified my unspoken knowledge that I would never ever teach in a high school. The extemp event was a really challenging competition. The kids were given a topic pulled from current events and given an hour to prepare. They were required to do research and document their position. In order to do that, we had amassed a huge stack of news magazines, Time, Newsweek, U.S. News and World Report, that kind of thing. Most of what we brought with us came from the school library, borrowed of course. The girl that competed in that event was also entered in another event on the other side of the school. She was running late, and rather than have her struggle with this huge stack of magazines, which she didn't need for her next event, I told her to get going and I would take care of them. I was just going to the classroom next door to watch another event, so I left the stack of magazines behind and I'd get them after that event. There wasn't anybody scheduled for anything in the classroom where I left the magazines, so they wouldn't be in anybody's way. No problem. Oh, if I had only taken the time to gather up that big stack of materials. So when I went back to the room to get them an hour later, they were gone. I checked with anybody who was anybody, and no one knew anything about them. Well, now here's where it gets nasty. When Mrs. Alley found out that I had lost the borrowed library materials, she lost it. And I sort of knew by then that she could be a bitch, but I wasn't prepared for the venom. She berated me endlessly in front of my students. The ride back to Richmond she drove was hell. The only good thing was that the kids were seeing what a cruel witch she really was, and they were being very supportive. This was their day. I felt I had ruined it for them, but they didn't care about that. They were very concerned about me, which was very sweet, and unfortunately, one of the guys trying to lighten the mood started joking around and called me Tom instead of Mr. Chasm. Big mistake. Mrs. Alley, who was still boiling about how I had wrecked her reputation at school, just about wrecked the car. She basically never spoke to me again. Fortunately, my 2-month stint ended a week later. Needless to say, she gave me a scathing review, which required an ugly session with my advisor at Taylor, and another student teaching a stint that lasted 4 weeks at another school nearby. I had a great experience there teaching a speech class where my supervising teacher let me have the drama section. The kids loved it. I'm sorry I don't remember that teacher's name, but he was there every day, helping and encouraging, and basically the polar opposite of the darling, smelly Mrs. Alley. By the way, I did know her first name at the time, but I was never allowed to use it. If I'd tried, I could probably recall it, but I don't really care to. The reason I was reminded of all this unpleasantness was because of the Boys in the Band segment of The Celluloid Closet, which I just saw recently. When that movie opened in Richmond, of course I went. Mrs. Alley and her husband showed up at the same showing. I went alone, of course, since I didn't know anyone outside of Richmond High School. I was already seated when she and her husband arrived. We saw each other, but she didn't acknowledge me. About halfway through, she and hubby left, and she made a point of making sure I saw how disgusted she was. I truly believe that those 2 months in 1970 were the absolute worst 2 months of my entire life. I've never been so alone. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And thanks for joining me. Please share your stories with us. You can do so by sending them to our email address, which is storiesfromtheheart09@gmail.com. If you have any other questions or comments, feel free to email us there as well. And we'll be seeing you soon. Bye.